Welcome everybody to Bass, Baboon, Bald Eagle Practicum orientation. We're going to go over sort of the general structure of your practicum as well as get into a little bit more details into tools and flow and all of those good things. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so practicum structure. For those of you that have graduated out of the React and Node Express classes or are turning in your final projects, I think today or tomorrow, if you're turning them in before practicum starts and participating in practicum, then this will be the structure for React Node. You all have predominantly formed groups for the most part, but anybody that are any outliers or you didn't get a chance to form groups with people, then I'll go ahead and get you all organized into groups as needed. Each group will have its own mentor, and you'll either have backup mentors or you'll have assistant mentors. In most of the cases, you'll have a mentor and an assistant mentor. Your mentor is somebody who works in development as a developer in Node and or React. And then your assistant mentor is going to be either a recent graduate of the class that's also taken our other advanced class, or might be an apprentice from our lab side or an employee from our lab side. So you'll have two folks that you can turn to for any kind of technical assistance, and they'll be there to be able to provide any insights either from their experience in practicum before, if they've graduated with us through other means, or they'll also be able to give you experience from like, yeah, that's going to be bigger than y'all can do in an 8-week period, or maybe prioritize this feature over that feature because that feature has better usability or things like that. So they'll be sort of the voice of experience that they'll be able to contribute towards your plans. But predominantly, you'll be working together with each other to be able to build your site or your application together. Did I skip over a slide? I might have skipped over a slide. There we go. Yeah, I got a little click happy. For Ruby on Rails, all of the graduates will be together in one group with one mentor, one assistant mentor, and you'll be working off of somebody's final project, whatever your votes are. If you have not completed your practicum participant form yet, either for the Ruby on Rails practicum grouping, or if you're in Bald Eagle or Baboon and you haven't completed your practicum participant form yet, please get those into me no later than end of day tomorrow, so that way I can start getting groups organized over the weekend. Questions about structure at all before I move on? Okay, let's talk curriculum. Your primary goals throughout practicum is going to be to continue using the skills that you learned in class, build on those, get more comfortable with them, build your confidence in the tech stack that you just spent 17 weeks learning. So build on that, or if you feel comfortable in what you're learning and you want to sort of start to branch out and stretch yourself a little bit, then that's perfectly fine too. You'll also be focusing on learning how to cooperatively and collaboratively work together on one body of code. So once you're in a team development environment where you got multiple people touching the same code base, then it's sort of like learning how to dance. You've got a couple of people and they're all moving in different ways at different times, and you need to make it work seamlessly, or as close to seamlessly as possible. So it's going to be a chance to be able to give you experience with that and get a little more comfortable about how to communicate with your coworkers, how to keep an eye on the overall big picture of your project while still getting the work done on the minutia that needs to be built in order for the whole big picture to come together. You'll learn about workflow process, Agile, Scrum, stand-ups. We'll talk a little bit about those briefly tonight too, just to give you an idea of what those words are, what they mean, and what they look like on a calendar. And the importance of communication. You'll be using a couple different project management devices. We're primarily setting you up with GitHub projects, but if your team feels more comfortable using something like a Trello board or any other Kanban style thing, you're welcome to do that. Overall, you'll be learning how projects are managed from concept through build, through testing, through deployment. You'll handle any kind of merge conflicts that happen. And see how those are dealt with in case you've got multiple people working on the same code base and they change different parts of code at the same time. And so now we need to figure out, okay, which version of code needs to be kept, or do we have to kind of blend them together properly? At the end, you'll participate in demoing your work. So the Tuesday following the end of your presentation, or sorry, end of your practicum, then you'll do presentations. You all finish on, sorry, I'm just looking at the calendar to make sure I'm telling you the right dates. May 9th is when you will be presenting your practicum projects. So you kind of end on the 5th, Friday, May 5th, but a lot of folks, a lot of groups in the past, if there has been little things they need to finish up before presentations, then they might work on it through the weekend or spend Monday the 8th working on it. And then noon Eastern time on Tuesday, May 9th is when you'll demo your projects as a group if everybody's able to make it, or you'll make recordings of people who can't make it and kind of cobble together a team presentation of your project. And in the end, we hope it'll be completing and deploying just a nice, simple app. You don't have to bite off too much with this project. Questions about our goals or curriculum stuff quite yet? All right, we'll keep on rolling. Okay, so similar to class, time commitment, it should still be that 10 to 20 hours roughly that folks are spending on practicum project work, just like you were spending that kind of average for classwork as well. If you are feeling like you're doing 20 to 40 hours of work, you need to be communicating with your team and saying, hey, I'm doing a lot of heavy lifting. Can we either scale back what I'm working on, or maybe I need to focus on just a small piece of it, or I need another person to be able to help me with this. So it's important to kind of communicate with that. If you are getting things done in less than 10 hours a week and you want to take on more, talk to your team about that as well too, and be like, hey, I've got a little extra time. I can go ahead and help out with something. It's all about kind of balancing needs and communicating with one another. Different from class, so you're not going to have as much structure as you did in class. Class, week to week, you'd have your lesson materials, so you knew exactly what it was that you needed to cover, segments of videos, chapters of books, whatever. And then you'd meet with mentors during mentor session or one-on-one to be able to help get any kind of confusion out of the way for any of the content that you went with. And then your coding assignment, you had either step-by-step instructions or you had sort of a clear outline of what you should be doing for that particular coding assignment. It's not going to be like that in Practicum because each of your groups will be picking something unique or different from what you built in class to be able to create. So some rules might apply for some groups that don't apply for others as far as how they're structuring whatever it is that their site is doing. You might want to use third-party libraries, gems, things like that, that you haven't used in class, but it's a nice feature that now that you've got multiple people working on the same code base, you can do a little bit more than what you had time to do just by yourself for your final project. Less structure, but there are still overall concepts as far as like, this is what you should be focusing on this week. These are some things you should achieve this sprint phase, things of that nature. So you'll still have those clear objectives as far as what your team should accomplish during that sprint. You'll have objectives to your individual stack team for Baboon and Bald Eagle students, as far as like front end students should be doing this week, back end students, the node students should be doing this week within your groups. And then of course you'll have things that you'll accomplish on your own. So as a group, if you decide person A in the group is going to create a wireframe and person B is going to start coming up with color schemes and person C is going to create the boilerplate code or create the primary Create React app or whatever, then you'll each have your own individual tasks that you're doing too. You will have a more regular schedule that'll mimic a real world work situation. You should be asynchronously communicating daily in your team practicum channels, which I'll be adding you to this weekend, to be able to let each other know, this is what I'm working on, this is almost done, I just finished this, that kind of information. You'll have bi-weekly sprint meetings, but really have weekly meetings regardless. But you'll have bi-weekly sprint meetings so that way you know, okay, did we get done over the past 2 weeks everything we intended to focus on and knock out? Do we need a little more time on this? Are we ready to move on to the next thing? That kind of a thing. So you'll have weekly meetings with your end, you'll have weekly meetings with your group as a whole. And then you'll be communicating regularly. You'll be collaborating more with each other. If you're stuck on a problem, don't wait to get help with whatever the problem is. So when you're working on your own, it's okay for you to sort of grapple with something for several hours to see if you can figure it out on your own. But when you're working as a part of a development team, if you hit a wall and it's maybe like half an hour to an hour, you think, Frank, is a good window of time to be like, look, I'm not getting anywhere on this. Let me reach out to somebody for help. Is that a good gauge, or do you think that's too tight of a window?
It's hard to say exact number, exact time. I would say about an hour.
Okay.
Again, when you reach out to a mentor, you don't know when that mentor will check the channel. You could be working during the day, working in the evening, and vice versa. So I would say, work on something for about an hour or so. If you are just stuck on something, reach out, try to connect with your fellow group mates. If you're still stuck, then reach out, to a mentor, but don't wait. So if it's something that's okay, I have this problem, we just can't figure out, let's move on to something else. Don't let that hold you up, unless it's something that you have to get done in order for the next thing to work. That's all.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. That's excellently described, Frank, as far as timing and to make sure that it's not just sitting and, kind of twiddling your thumbs like, well, I don't have an answer yet, so I can't do anything. Still be working to try and make progress on some other aspect of your app if you're able to, while you're waiting for responses back. Questions about similarities and differences between class or this sort of continued practicum curriculum content? Anybody confused about anything or have questions? Alrighty, so class tools. A lot of the tools are going to be pretty similar from what you had in class, so there shouldn't be anything too horribly new in this realm of the class. You already have your practicum pages published and they're available through navigation. I still need to create your pictures for you, but on the main landing, learn.codethedream.org page, you're also listed there as well. So we've got the Baboon Bald Eagle Practicum, you've got your site, and then we also have Bass Practicum, you've got your site. That'll give you a course calendar breakdown as far as what you're looking at from week to week. I'll pull them up really quick and pull them onto the screen just so that way you all can see kind of what they're looking like. And classes, backend practicum, Baboon practicum, Bald Eagle practicum. So for React Node students, you've got 4 sprints, and each sprint, it'll have information here as far as, okay, sprint 1, which is your first 2 weeks of practicum from March 13th through March 26th. Here are some activities as far as this is what everybody should be working on together. And then back end, here's what just Node students should be working on. Front end is just what React students should be working on. Additional resources that you can go through to kind of help get yourself a little more comfortable or remind yourself of anything. And then development methods as far as agile principles, Scrum, using a Kanban board, all of that kind of information. And then jumping over to Bass, backend practicum, yours actually has 2 separate links per sprint. So you still have the 4 sprints and the same kind of 2-week range, but you'll want to take care of project definition and set up your first week, getting started with teamwork your second week. Or if you want to do it at a more accelerated pace or want to take a look at everything your first week and just be accomplishing bits and pieces throughout your 2 weeks, you're welcome to do it that way too. Questions about that at all? Okay. You still have the student resources page to help with GitHub cheat sheets, JavaScript style guides, any other kind of gem usage, SQL notation, anything like that. All of the student resources are still there and available. But as most developers do, you'll probably Google things as you run into them to be able to kind of dig deeper into particular concepts or things. And or you'll look at development documentation if there are particular libraries or gems or things that you're implementing. GitHub, you'll still be using GitHub. Let me go ahead and pull that up really quick too, so that way you all can see what our structure is like for that. So for Baboon and Bald Eagle students, you are going to have, let me jump to the right link here. You're going to have 2 repositories for each team that are Baboon and Bald Eagle teams. And then let me just do here so that we can see. So you've got BB Practicum Team 3 front, BB Practicum Team 3 back. So you'll have a repository for all of your Node work. You'll have a separate repository for all of your React work. And then Frank's going to be building in some instructions for how to be able to get those 2 to be working cooperatively together. And each team has their own front and back for that. For Bass, you'll be using the repositories for any of the code of the student whose project you'll be working on. So remember to vote for which project of the 3 that were presented during finals night that you want to work on for Bass final project that is then rolled into Practicum. Questions about that?
Well, I had a question.
Yeah.
Which one is the Rails group again?
The Rails group is going to be KJ, Jacob, and Cherie. They
I
do
mean,
not have their own repository because they'll use the student's repository
yes, right.
and
Okay,
build
yeah.
on that. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So for Slack, you'll have individual channels for your team, and your team mentors will be on there with it. You'll also have sort of this overarching Bass, Bald Eagle, Baboon, Practicum channel, so that way I can put in announcements there that will go to all of you regardless of what your tech stack is, which team you're with, anything like that. And then we'll also have a separate one that's just for Baboon, Bald Eagle teams. So if I need to make an announcement just to Node, Express, React students, then it goes to all of the teams that are working in Node and React, separate from Bass students, so I don't clutter up their channel with Node React things. Optional tools that you might put into place are like Trello, Google Drive, Dropbox, etc. The primary one you'll probably be using, and we already have sort of the skeleton set up for you, is GitHub projects. And I'm going to go ahead and pull one of these up so that way you can take a look at it. So Baboon, Bald Eagle team. When you start getting into your repositories, you might notice that in your repository, you have, let me go ahead and jump to this. In your repository, you have an issue already posted in that particular repository. And it's just determine weekly meeting time with back and front end team members. So the project section of GitHub is just a way for you to be able to kind of organize any issues, organize any pull requests, assign different duties to different individuals. We'll be adding each of you to your repositories as collaborators. So that way, if we wanted to assign a particular task to somebody, we could do that. You can adjust this however you want to. Typically, you have a to-do, in progress, and done column in these kind of boards. And when something's accomplished, then you can just kind of slide it on over and move it and be like, okay, we're working on determining our weekly meeting times for the front end. So you can kind of click and drag and slide it around, but it's a handy tool to be able to keep organized when you have multiple people working on something together. Questions about the repositories or the projects board? Okay, keep on keeping on. So yeah, if there's something besides GitHub projects that you prefer to use, you're welcome to do that. Or if you're wanting to use like a Dropbox file or Google Drive or something to store like images you're using in your site, or data, like a Excel spreadsheet that you're going to pull data from into your application or anything like that, whatever other tools you need or want to use, you're welcome to use them however you need to. If there's any kind of cost associated with it, just come to myself or Frank, so that way we can either give you an alternative that would not have a cost to it, and or just make sure that you're understanding like what all of that means and you're not jumping in anything, because you shouldn't have to pay for anything that you're doing and building in Practicum. All right, roles and expectations. So as students complete your assigned weekly tasks that your group divvies up amongst yourselves as far as who's working on what, refer to your resources as appropriate, make sure that you're staying on track, reaching out for help when you need it, and not waiting to be able to move on to the next thing. Communicate regularly, even if it means like, hey, I'm sick for a couple of days, so the project I was working on is going to be slower getting accomplished, because you might have another team member that can't do their stuff until your stuff is done. So it's important to communicate regularly if you're going to have gaps in time, if you're going on vacation or you have to travel somewhere that you don't have connectivity, if you're sick, if something's come up, anything like that. Just make sure that you're communicating regularly. Attend your group weekly meetings. Still be supportive and encouraging and helpful the way you've been throughout class. Be respectful with one another. Sometimes it can be frustrating working in a group, but do everything you can to be able to help each of you succeed, so that way you can succeed collectively as a team. And kind of use it as a dress rehearsal for your first developer job or apprenticeship. So approach it from that same level of professionalism, as far as, being clear and concise, making sure that you're asking questions that everybody understands and is on the same page, and assume best intent of everyone, and get any kind of clarification. If there's any kind of tension or issues or anything that comes up, turn to your mentors for assistance, turn to Frank or I for assistance. And it should still be the same kind of time commitment as far as 10 to 20 hours a week for your practicum work. So if things are uneven within your group, talk about it amongst your group to be able to make sure that things stay even. Question?
And
Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
where it says attend group weekly meetings, now your group and your mentor will decide how many meetings you have. It could be either one group meeting with everybody. It could be one meeting with the front end people, one meeting with the back end people. It could be a combination. You may also have during the week, you may do smaller like Slack huddles for the front end people trying to figure out an issue. So, it may be on just like a once a week meeting. It may be multiple, especially at the beginning, kind of trying to figure out what the application is going to do, setting it up, and a lot of administrative things that have to get done, as well as towards the end, wrapping up functionality problems and things like that. So you should account for probably multiple meetings during the week, either at the beginning or at the end, to kind of get ramped up and kind of work out problems with each other.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks, Frank. If any of the groups have people that are kind of spread out across time zones, so where you think there might be an issue for any kind of ad hoc meetings or impromptu meetings that need to happen as you're tackling different things throughout practicum, remember you can also do things asynchronously. Designate a note taker during a meeting. Make sure that people who are missing it are catching all of that information and getting caught up on whatever was talked about. So that way you all can still be contributing even if you can't meet synchronously if something needs to be addressed by everybody in the group. Okay, mentors, backup mentors, your assistant mentors, they should be in attendance for whatever are your regular meetings. So whether, like Frank was saying, whether that's a front end meeting, a back end meeting, and then an additional like everybody together, or whether it's just one everybody together meeting, they should be in attendance for those. There might be times when you all want to group together just to kind of iron out wrinkles and make sure you're understanding each other, that you don't need the mentor, that's fine. Be sure that you're communicating that. If you're getting together on a particular problem, feature, anything like that, and you do need or want the mentor's guidance while you all are getting together, be sure to make sure that they know that as well too. And that you're able to accommodate at a time when everybody can get together. Any kind of backup mentors will kind of flit in and out multiple groups to be able to see kind of where you're at with things. Backup mentor intention is if something happens with your mentor, they get tied up at work, they fall ill, they have a death in the family and have to be away for a little bit, anything like that, then you still have somebody that you can turn to be able to get guidance and assistance. They'll be the voice of experience for your group. And should assist group and individuals as needed. Always try and tackle things yourself first, because sometimes the best way to learn is just get yourself in the thick of it and work your way out of the weeds. But if that's getting very time consuming in this short 8-week span, then definitely reach out to your mentors for assistance or reach out to your classmates to be able to get help. You can always pair program together. And they're here to support you. So if you have questions about practicum or beyond, feel free to reach out to them. All right, so let's talk about like the class flow as far as what it's going to look like. And this is just an example. Do what works for your team. If you all have already decided Saturdays are going to work best for everybody to have your weekly meeting, that's fine. So do whatever makes the most sense for your team. Just keep in mind that you're still on this 8-week track with 4 2-week sprints to kind of keep an eye on that. But Monday through Friday, regularly check in through your project management device. So be checking your GitHub projects board or your Trello board or whatever you're using. Update it as needed. So when you complete a task, go ahead and update your board. When you're getting ready to start a task, go ahead and update your board. Work on any tasks, communicate with your team about questions. You can have that asynchronous daily Scrum meeting just to say, this is what I'm working on today. This is what I've finished. This is where I think I might have some struggles today. Anything along those lines. Share that helpful information from day to day. On your meeting day, provide an update on what you've gotten done up to this point, work together on any problems, make any changes you might need to kind of rescale or replan what you're going to be working on, and review your plan for what's going to be coming up. So make sure everybody's clear on next steps. So, okay, over the next week or two, this person's working on this person's working on that. So that way it can all kind of come together. Weekends are optional as far as like if you're just planning on treating this as a job Monday through Friday kind of a thing, then that's fine. If your team needs to do like a Tuesday through Sunday, that's fine too. So just communicate as far as knowing what the expectation is for who's going to be working on what when. Throughout the 8 weeks, keep in mind what your learning goals are and work to build your team skills. So each of you are coming into practicum with your own idea of, I really want to strengthen my knowledge in this, or I want more practice with that, or I'd like to see how they do this on a team development. So keep in mind what those are and be attentive whenever your team is handling those things to be sure to be involved in that process, but also work on your soft skills, your team building skills to be able to work with each other, because that'll really make you shine when you're out there doing your job interviews and just get you more comfortable with working with a team of developers. Question about class flow at all so far up to this point, or other questions that need to be addressed? Okay, we'll keep on keeping on. So as we had mentioned and showed you earlier, each team has 2 repositories for the Baboon and Bald Eagle students. Bass, you'll just have the 1 repository that you're working on that is owned by the student whose project you're overtaking. But for Baboon and Bald Eagle, you'll each have those 2 repositories. Your mentor is going to be the admin on that account, but all of you will be collaborators. And you'll want to make sure that you're observing and assisting with any kind of merge conflict resolution. Understand the process that's happening within your repository as far as how data is getting updated and moved around, and how everything's coming together. It'll also be helpful because then you'll understand if there's anything you need to do on your local copy to make sure that it's functioning the way it's functioning in your primary project repository. The actual like day-to-day flow is going to be different than what you did in class. So in class, you forked the repository first, then you cloned your forked copy. This time you're just going to clone the repository directly. So you don't need to worry about forking the repository at all. Just clone your repository directly. Make sure that you're always doing your work on a separate branch. So just like in class, you did like a lesson 1 or a week 1 or whatever branch where you were doing your coding assignment on, and then you push it back to your repository. Make sure you're doing it on a separate branch. Name your branch something appropriate. So if you're working on the login page, then have your branch called login functionality or something. And then you'll do your pull requests back to the group's repository. So that's where it's different, is you're updating code that other people are collaborating on and touching on. So you're going to clone and you'll be doing your pull requests back to that one instead of doing it to your own copy, because you won't have your own copy other than your locally cloned copy of the school published copy. Does that make sense? I feel like I totally just made that more confusing the way I explained it.
Question
Yeah.
regarding branches, like should we all individually have our own branches, or like if let's suppose I work on the same page page with another student, should we have the same branch, like the same name? No.
Excellent question. Frank, did you want to address that or did you want me to?
So every feature will have its own branch. So if you're working on, now you don't like saying necessarily the page, but if you're it's still like all one page per se. But if you're working on a feature that may kind of be overlapping somebody else's feature, now there may be some slight merge conflicts you have to work out. But if everybody will be assigned a feature. Okay, create a form, create some code to interact with the API, do some styling. So maybe your feature is just styling a form that someone worked on. Now they're or is updating and so forth. So there may be some possible merge conflicts, but everybody will be getting assigned a feature, and each feature will get its own branch. And then if there are merge conflicts, then you'll work it out after you push it and review. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Okay.
awesome. I was just checking to make
And
sure everything.
So the reason why also you're cloning and not forking, just like Mary Alice said, is the repo, each group's repo, the front end repo and the back end repo. That's where we're going to be pushing to. you're not going to be forking it, because if you forked it, it makes a copy to your own, GitHub repo, which you don't want. So you'll be working on the branch that you create locally. You'll work on that feature. You'll test it. Once it's all good, you'll push to your group's front end or back end repo, create a PR for it. It'll get reviewed. And then as long as everything works fine, there's no problems, a mentor will review your code. As long as everything is good, it'll then eventually get merged into the main branch. Okay, so
question.
That makes sense.
Forking and pulling, is it kind of the same? Like we're not supposed to pull the code before?
No, you're not supposed to fork.
Yeah, so fork makes a copy of the Code the Dream School repository, and it makes that copy over to your personal GitHub account copy. But instead, you want to clone. You'll still do pushes and pulls. So you'll pull from the Code the Dream School one to update your local, and you'll push your local up to the Code the Dream School one. So that way it just stays between those two instead of doing this.
But what about pulling? You'll still
do
pulling
from Code the Dream School.
Yeah,
like
so
each time. After pushing, I would do a pull. Understood.
So each time you work on a new branch, you're going to pull the latest version of what's merged into the main branch, or sometimes they call it dev, but for our purposes, it'll just be the main branch. So that's like the latest version of all the different branches that have been merged together, like the latest version. Now, each day or each week, it'll get changed with being new merges. But you're always going to be, when you work on a new branch, you'll be pulling from that main branch. So, okay, this is what we have so far. This is the state of our application. And then I'm going to work on a new feature in my own branch. Okay. And then pushing up to the repo, your front end or back end repo of the projects repo. Again, not doing forking where it goes to your own your own personal account.
Thank you. I think I understood, because I had an issue during with the pulling thing, because I was
it's definitely confusing. Yeah, definitely confusing. Yep.
Thank you.
And that first, depending how the mentor wants to go through it, that first week, they'll probably do a couple little tests on just showing exactly what the process is going to be. Just some really simple ones. Creating a simple branch and doing something really simple. Say, okay, each person will do one, just adding something really simple just to get that process down.
Awesome. Any other questions that we need to address before moving on? Merge conflicts can be a part of a group project, and especially when you're first learning, then it's normal to encounter them. As you get older or have more experienced, I guess, in the field, ideally the number of merge conflicts that will happen will start to wane because you'll be more comfortable with who's touching what code to be able to avoid them in the first place.
It really depends, because the larger the code base, the more nested your components will be, which means the more you'll have components used in other places. Like you could be working on 2 or 3 components, and if the code base is big enough, you're like, man, this is used in a whole bunch of places. Now, for a smaller project like we're working on a Practicum, that won't be the case as much. Each component will be like its own entity, so to speak. Even though it's used in other components, it won't touch too many other places. But it's not really dependent on the size of the code base, but a lot of times it is, because usually if you are developing, it's more akin to developing a lot of reusable components. So the more reusable components you build, the more times that component will touch other files and be used in other files, which the opportunity comes up of merge conflicts. So it's more dependent on the size of the code base and also how many reusable components you create. So again, it happens, but it's not something that is dependent on just one factor.
I had a quick question on the merging. So I pull from the repository, I make my branch, I make my changes, I push my changes up, then I open up a pull request. That pull request has to be approved by the mentor before it gets merged?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, mentor or assistant mentor. Yeah. Yeah. And usually that's what the process is. Like in a real project, you'll have at least one, but normally at least two people reviewing it first. Now, in larger code bases, before even after it gets reviewed, it'll then get moved into, say, a testing phase, and it gets tested further, as well as in other environments, and then eventually it'll get merged. And then a lot of times, once it gets merged, it'll get deployed. Now, in our case, for our 8-week practicum, the deployment won't normally happen till the end, but you may want to try out deployment earlier just to see how that process works instead of waiting to the end. But normally, it'll be like a review process by a mentor, and then it'll get merged afterwards.
Any other questions? Okay, so we also have sort of a visual as far as like students working on various working branches. All of the React students will pull from main, move to whatever their feature branch is or working branch is, and then do the pushes back to the repository from there. And then same thing with Node, to where you have sort of this structure of you're pulling from the Code the Dream School GitHub account, doing your work on your feature branch or your working branch, pushing it back up to your Code the Dream School repository.
I had a question. When do the students get added to the repos? Not until their first week starts?
It'll actually be this weekend. So we have your GitHub handles from your assignments that you turned in throughout class. So we'll be adding you on as collaborators. You'll probably see some emails with whatever email account you have associated with your GitHub account with notifications saying, hey, you've been invited to collaborate on such and such repository. That's perfectly fine. You can go ahead and either accept it, get it all set up, get yourself familiar with it if you want to, or you can wait until your first group meeting to be able to tackle those things too, whatever you're comfortable doing. Good question, Frank.
The reason why I'm asking for myself necessarily, because I got to do that stuff to the repos first before they have access to it. So just let me know before you get that set up, so I make sure I get my stuff done. So the reason why also I'm asking, so last practicum, I forget if it was, I think it was a mixture of some repos had the front and back end code in it and others had separate. So in this practicum, we're trying it all separate. So what that means is for students that are working on the front end, they have to actually have a copy of obviously their own repo for the front end, but also a copy of the back end. So I'm going to write some notes and a couple little examples in both repos. So I want to kind of do that before you get access to it and start cloning, where in order to test the front end that's going to interact with the back end, meaning the API, you have to have the front end running, obviously if it's React, and the back end Node Express server running to interact with that API that the back end project will give. So that's going to be like the one thing that people who haven't taken the Node Express course and just the React will have to get used to a little bit. So that'll be hopefully done with the Mentors for Each group in that first 2 weeks to say, okay, let's try out and test, the front and back end working together, communicate together. I'm going to have like a really simple like test API on the back end repos, so their front end can kind of try out just to say, okay, I can connect. I know how to run obviously my React. I know how now to run my backend Express server. I can run it and test it. So basically, you'll have 2 local servers running on your computer, pretty much the whole time for testing the front end with the back end.
Question in the chat, or we are going to pull twice, once for the front end, once for the back end. You'll clone twice and you'll pull twice. So you'll clone the front end copy and you'll need to pull any changes after merges happen to the front end, and you'll clone the back end and you'll pull any changes that happen to the back end to keep your local copy up to date. Yeah, that was a good question. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about just sort of your workflow structure flow. Were there any other questions that people needed addressed? Good. Okay. All right. Agile, Sprint, and Scrum. So Agile is an iterative approach to project management that involves working in small, manageable increments of work. So your entire 8 weeks will be Agile. Sprint in Practicum is a 2-week period where teams are focused on a specific feature of the product. So each of your 4 sprints are going to be those 2-week blocks like you saw on your course calendar. And then Scrum are short daily meetings to identify each team member's progress on their tasks, identify blockers, and be able to keep momentum going within the group. So those are just sort of definitions in case you're hearing these words flying about, then you have an idea of what they mean. And here's a short video that I'm going to go ahead and play for you that kind of describes this fairly well as well too. Let me just, actually, I think I can probably play it from here. There we go. Everybody hear it okay? Just throw a thumbs up if you can hear it okay.
So you're a project manager. Maybe you've been doing it for years, or maybe you woke up one day and realized that you'd somehow fallen into the project manager role without even intending to. By now, you've probably come across one of project managers' favorite buzzwords, agile. It's a term that's thrown around all the time in the world of project management. Regardless of how many years you've been at the job, you may still be wondering, what on earth is agile project management? And that's exactly what I'm going to explain. When people talk about an agile project management methodology, what they're usually describing is a flexible, iterative design and build process. Okay, that's great, but what does that mean? Agile projects are characterized by a series of tasks that are conceived, executed, and adapted as a situation demands rather than a pre-planned process. Being agile helps teams respond to unpredictability through incremental, iterative work processes.
Let's take a look at an example. A chef wants to make the world's best agile burger, but they know the only way of making that burger is to get insights from customers on what that burger should be. The requirements are pretty flexible, and the chef wants to use short feedback loops with customers to quickly iterate on the burger and make it awesome. So the chef and their team collaborate together to make the first burger. This is first product iteration. The chef has delivered some value but needs feedback so they can iterate on the product and deliver more value next time. So as a way of testing and learning, the chef shares it with the customer, and the customer gives it a 5 out of 10. They get the feedback that the burger's okay, but adding bacon would make it better. So the chef works with the team to make another burger and adds bacon. This is the second iteration of the product. The customer gives it a 6 out of 10, so the chef has delivered more value than the last time, but they need to keep iterating so they can get to the world's best burger. The chef continues to create iterations of the burger, testing with customers, learning from them how to improve the product, and then iterating on the recipe to progressively add more value. Over more iterations, cheese, mushrooms, and pickles are added to iterate on the burger, and customer satisfaction goes up with it. The burger becomes the world's best agile burger. Through an iterative process, the product increases in value as it becomes more aligned to what customers really want.
An agile project management process is very much like the chef. It requires project teams to cycle through a process of planning, executing, and evaluating as they go along. Other project management methods usually assume that factors influencing the project are predictable, meaning that the majority of the planning happens before the projects begin. Agile, however, emphasizes adaptability to changing situations, as well as adequate and ongoing communication among the project team and between them and the client. Because of Agile's iterative nature, it reduces risk and allows for a better end product if unexpected events occur. The project will have intervals with designated goals and tasks, and once that period of time comes to an end, the team will meet, evaluate, and reassess what needs to happen to move the project forward to success. Agile methodologies are great to use in dynamic environments where there's potential for changing or evolving requirements, such as software and game development. So to wrap things up, an agile project is flexible and doesn't require all the planning to occur at the beginning of the project. The product solution evolves throughout the life cycle of the project as the team reviews and realigns as necessary, making agile projects more likely to end in success. Do you have any tips and tricks for running agile projects? Let us know in the comments down below. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay, now that you got to hear some fun royalty-free canned music and hear the description, does that feel like it makes sense to everybody as far as sort of what that workflow is like and how you kind of have these iterations where you're focusing on just a particular feature, particular aspect of your site, and then kind of moving on from there? Good stuff. Ah, no, stop playing.
So,
Go
so,
ahead,
so
Frank.
yeah, so the word agile is just a way, it's just a way that's been around for, I think, probably since mid 90s, early 90s, where it's just a methodology of how you work on a project. So back in the olden days when I did stuff, it was basically, they would say that's a waterfall methodology, where basically we want to build something, right? We have to get all the stakeholders, the client, everything else to, approve it, get the money all ready to go, and what's going to work on, and we'll give you 3 months or 6 months to get it done, right? They call that like the waterfall, where basically you have you have everything figured out, approved, and you have a long period of time to finish it. But that methodology, that workflow of waiting a couple months till the client gets their end result isn't perfect, has a lot of problems, or had a lot of problems. So this agile approach, came later, 10, 20, 30 years later, where, okay, instead of waiting till 3, 6, 9, 10 months, a year till the finished product, the product is finished, we'll give you like little versions of it every sprint. A sprint can be 2 weeks, a sprint can be 3 weeks, a sprint can be 4 weeks, but every sprint will get at the next version of that application. Okay, usually at the very beginning was, you don't do too much in the first 2 weeks, but you just a little bit every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, however long your sprints are. But by having it done that way, the client can see each version a lot earlier, and say, okay, well, maybe after this version, add these new features. So that next sprint, 2 weeks later, we can add these new features, as opposed to have to figure out everything that application has to do at the very beginning, and then through that 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months, if it was doing a non-agile approach, a methodology, you wouldn't really see the end. Or if you did, you would say, okay, well, maybe I don't want this. Well, that was already approved at the very beginning. We can't change it now. Or if there was, it may cause some problems. So using an agile approach, which we just add, a few pieces of functionality, few features every 2 weeks or 3 weeks per sprint, it gives the client, a reason to say, okay, well, I like this or I don't like that. So that's why I say it's a lot more flexible than the old school way, which still a lot of companies use, of like the waterfall approach.
Awesome. Thanks, Frank. Yeah, that's all those, jargon terms and cliches and things like that. All those trick words that they use to be able to describe different workflows and things like that. But yeah, awesome. Questions up to this point? Okay, so let's talk merge conflicts as far as when do they happen, why do they happen, how to fix it. So when you've got multiple people working on the same code base, it's likely that merge conflicts are going to happen. That's normal. And it's when two branches that are set to be merged to one primary location, like your main branch, have differences in code. And sometimes the differences can be small, like maybe you hit your return button and it, moved lines of code down one. And so now the lines don't match up and there's confusion. And they can also be large, like you completely accidentally overwrote somebody's block of code or something. Computers can only get us so far. Humans will need to review any kind of merge conflicts. So whenever you're getting ready to merge your pull request, or your mentors are getting ready to merge your pull request to your main branch or to your development branch, they'll GitHub checks, and it either gives you that green check mark like a lot of you saw when you were merging your lessons to your main branch from week to week in class, or it'll let you know, hold on, there's a conflict, and it'll identify where the conflict happens. It will show you the files, it will show you the versions of those files that are in conflict with one another. So from there, then you all would work together to be able to figure out, okay, yes, this needs to go here. We need to take this line of code, but that line of code we don't need, take that out, and you can go from there. Ways to be able to help avoid conflicts is to pull locally after each pull request gets merged. So for example, let's say Kate and Olga, because you're the first two on my screen, I'm going to pick on you guys. If Kate and Olga are on the same team and Kate does her feature and does a pull request, And then Olga, you need to start working on another feature. If you haven't updated locally from the changes that Kate made that got merged to main, and then you do your feature and push it back, then it's going to have errors because you didn't first pull from main to include in your local code the changes that Kate did first. So when you go to push and process a pull request, then it's going to say, wait a minute, Olga's copy doesn't have the stuff that Kate did. So which one do I need to take? Do I need to get rid of Kate's stuff, or do I need to make whatever changes you made and add them into the changes that Kate made? Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense as it's sort of a use case. Does everybody feel a little bit comfortable on just sort of the concept of that? Okay. Always do your work on a separate branch from main or development. So make sure that you're on a feature branch of some variety to be able to do that. And then smaller, more frequent changes are better than having large changes. So if you write 150 lines of code to be able to build your login page and all of its features of, you know, checking for authentication and showing profile pictures and letting users update content through a form and anything like that. If you have all of that in one great big chunk and you try and push it, and it's been a long time since you've done any kind of pulls or there's any other kind of issue, that's a lot of code to have to go through, as opposed to, oh, here's 10 lines of code. I see what happened here. They just updated the prop type's name or something. So smaller, more frequent changes are definitely better than having large changes infrequently. So those are the tips that we always usually recommend. I've also got a little video from much earlier Practicum presentation. We had a really awesome volunteer, Gaetan Siri, who had helped us through several classes that helped demonstrate sort of a merge conflict. So I'm going to show you this little video to kind of give you an idea and give you a visual of this is what happens when merge conflicts occur and how they're resolved. If it loads. This is where Gaetan's going to show us the fun and adventures.
All right. Let's do it. Can I share? Okay. Go.
I might have to make you co-host. Oh, no, you're good. Okay, all right.
No, I got it. Everybody see my screen?
Yep.
All right. So merge conflict. So yesterday afternoon, I made Mary Alice collaborator.
Sorry, I just want to make the screen bigger so it'll be a little easier to see.
And next thing you know, I get a pull request and she's trying to overwrite my work.
I'm such a troublemaker.
This is not a good thing, right? So, you know, here's the pull request. Here's Mary Alice's pull request right here. And this is telling me that this branch has conflicts that must be resolved. Okay, so something is wrong here. So merge conflicts happen when edits are made in two separate branches on the same line. Or for example, one file gets deleted from one branch and then the other branch has edits to that same file that's been deleted, and then you do the pull request and, you know, we've got a problem, right? Because here's a file that was deleted and now Mary Alice is trying to make edits to that file that doesn't exist anymore. So Git is kind of confused as to what to do. You know, Git handles merges quite nicely most of the time, but in this case, it just doesn't know what to do. So in this particular case, Mary Alice decided to edit a README file. And so if I go back a little bit, let me just look at what she did. So I'm gonna go here. So this is the merge right here. So I have my README file, and on the first line, it used to say README. So that's what was committed to the branch. And then Mary Alice changed this to final project. And she also deleted a couple of lines below. But the most important part here is that on that same line where there was a README, she changed it to final project. Okay. So let's take a look at the pull request. Okay, so obviously GitHub tells you that, you know, there's a conflict here, and you get this button called resolve conflicts. Okay, so they give you a chance to look at what happened and trying to resolve it so you can actually merge the work, right? So I'm going to click on this resolve conflict button here. And it's going to come up with this editor here that allows me to kind of figure out what's going on, what I want to keep, and what I want to delete out of this. Okay, so I can decide, hey, you know, Mary Alice, you had no right to change my file, and I can just get rid of whatever she did. Or I can decide to keep both things, you know, which I can do right in this editor. Keep everything, like we basically merge everything. You know, it's got my changes, it's got this line here, and it's got Mary Alice's changes as well. And I can mark this as resolved if I'm happy with that.
That where it says line 2, where it says changing this line to cause a conflict.
Yeah, she actually, I think.
Yeah, that
she
was my
put that
text.
in, right?
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that
that's
was
just
my
like a
text. That's
comment.
not something that you would see.
It
Yeah.
is, yes.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
is. So once the file looks good, you just click on mark as resolved, you know, and this is a simple conflict because it only, you know, it happened on one file and it's pretty simple to resolve, right? So you might run into conflict with multiple files and they'll all be listed here. And you basically have to go through all the changes that people made and attempt to resolve the conflict. Okay, so there's a bit of a review process going on. A lot of communication between team members to see, hey, how can we make this merge work some way, somehow, right? So how do you avoid that in the first place? First of all, if possible, try to work on different files. You know, don't try to work on the same files at the same time. And if you must work on the same files at the same time, then communicate as far as what changes you're about to make.
Okay, so that covered the biggest part, I think, of merge conflict, and hopefully gave everybody a visual as far as what to expect, or kind of a preliminary introduction of what to see when merge conflicts happen. He had mentioned in the video, you know, multiple files can be affected sometimes, and so it's a matter of going through and ironing out those wrinkles. And so you'd have multiple files listed here on the panel as far as, you know, these are the different files, and it would show that same kind of notation as far as what's coming, what's going, which version to keep, or change it to something else that kind of combines those. Did that feel helpful? Does anybody feel more confused or have any questions or issues?
It's helpful for me because I ran into this issue before the submission of the final project, and because I had the issue with finding a reviewer, and I had a big issue because I had to redo some old branches and then I pushed them back, and I was not merging the newest ones, and I created a lot of other folders, and I had millions of conflicts. So I
Oh, that's no fun.
did not know
See,
how
so
to
you're already a
solve
pro
it.
at this, Olga, then.
Yeah,
We'll
the
send
thing
anybody
that
with questions to you. No, just kidding.
yeah, I did not solve it very wisely. I just corrected the main branch, like physically. I know
Yes.
it's not the best approach, but it was the shortest version of my approach. I don't know.
Yeah.
So thank you
Yeah.
for clarifying.
Yeah.
Now I know what to
absolutely.
do, to pull and to communicate.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so we're getting near the end. So what happens now? Decide among your group day and time that you'll meet each week. As a whole group, React students might be deciding about meeting among themselves, Node amongst themselves as well too. If you haven't yet, brainstorm ideas. Sorry, is anybody else getting like weird feedback at all?
I'm just hearing it just a little bit.
Okay. Hopefully that's a little bit better. Okay. If you haven't yet, brainstorm ideas for your project, narrow it down to 1 or 2 ideas. For the Bass students, fill out those Practicum participant forms. That'll let me know which project of the 3 that were presented on finals night you're interested in having as a Practicum project. So that way we can be getting all of that stuff set up for you. And your mentors will be able to help as far as like scoping your project and everything too. And start looking at your Practicum web pages and your Sprint 1 links so you can get a little bit more comfortable with that, or at least kind of have a review of that material before diving in on Monday. And then what happens after practicum? So at the end of practicum, you'll complete a self-evaluation form, and that self-evaluation form serves as your application to the apprenticeship, if that's what you're wanting to do. So you'll say, here's where I feel confidence level wise on these different skills that you're asking me to rate myself on. And then it'll say, what do you want to do next? And it'll give you choices as far as apply for the apprenticeship, take another advanced class, start job searching, do nothing. It'll lay out all of those options, just like it did when you were submitting your final projects. So your self-evaluation form will have all that information, and that is your apprenticeship application. You don't have a separate thing that you have to go through. You'll also do that same form on your classmates and provide feedback, because you all have been working together closely. You'll know, where people's strengths lie, where they really shine, and maybe areas where it seemed like they were struggling with things. And that way we can share that feedback with each of you to let you know, hey, this might be an area you want to focus on as you're doing your job searching or as you're working through the apprenticeship program. This is an area that you might want to work on, and these are areas that you're doing well in, so you can either share that knowledge with others if you're wanting to help somebody else that's struggling with that concept when you're in an apprenticeship role or in another developer role. So it's helpful to be able to kind of know and be aware of strengths and weaknesses. Reminder about apprenticeship. So it's a 1-year offer, and it's a 9-month minimum commitment. So if you apply for the apprenticeship, we'll evaluate sort of where your skill level is at, and evaluate where our needs lie within our development shop as far as what vacancies we need to fill from apprentices moving on or projects that we're taking on. And that 9-month period, that first 9 months of the apprenticeship, no looking for new jobs, just focus on the apprenticeship tasks at hand. It will be a 40 hours a week job. It will be remote. You'll have a couple of meetings that'll be sort of standard time meetings that you'll need to attend, but otherwise the hours are flexible as far as when you're working on your work. You will want to make sure that there's at least some overlap, so that way if you're running into problems as an apprentice, you can reach out to the other members of the project you're working on or your project coordinator, things like that, to be able to get assistance and continue working on your project effectively. It is a paid position with benefits. It's only available to people in the US with work authorization, so W-2 form. If you are not in that grouping of individuals, then please let me know. I'll put you in touch with Lori Kamala. We do have some other opportunities that might be open to folks who aren't applicable for a W-2 that we can put you in touch with, so that way you can still be getting some solid experience, continue your work on things as you work towards getting a job in the development world. And it can be renewed for a second year. So if at the end of your first year of apprenticeship, you feel like you want to keep at it, that's fine. We can renew your contract for another year. Questions about end of practicum and apprenticeship information? Yeah.
I have a question. I think you already answered my question, but I apologize, my English, maybe I did not process it yet. If I already told you that during the summer I have an issue, I have to spend it in Europe for 2 months. So I am considering not to apply for apprenticeship right away, but to take a second class. So should I apply for it? Because I noticed it should be open, the enrollment, or I mean the open enrollment, or up to the 9th of April, but it says that it's not open. It's closed enrollment. Should I apply by myself or wait for the end of practicum?
Oh, okay, for applying for the upcoming classes. I understand now, Olga.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you won't need to apply through that, like the classes, or sorry, not classes, the codethedream.org/apply-now. I don't think you'll need to apply through that method because you've already been in class with us. So just let me know which course you're wanting to take, and that way I can go ahead and put you on the enrollment list for that class. Yeah, you won't have to like go through a pre-work process or anything to take another advanced class with us. You've already done one advanced class. If you want to take another, it's yours.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that holds true for anybody. So if you're interested in taking another advanced class after practicum, that's totally fine. Just get in touch with me so I can make sure that I have you on the list and give you the class information when it gets ready to start. Okay. And then let me see if I've got anything else. I think that was my last slide.
Mary Alice,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm also
Oh,
have
go
a
ahead,
question. Sorry, I had a bad poor internet connection.
Okay.
I'm on the way to home. I have another question in case of apprentice. As far as I know, we will have the information about apprenticeship, I think like in a month after the practicum. So we can, could we start like other class, because it's usually started earlier than apprenticeship, and just cancel it if we will get an apprentice, or it's no way for this?
Yeah, that's
I mean,
perfectly fine, Kate. So you can go ahead and like
mhm,
if the class will be starting before you would potentially
mhm,
be
mhm.
accepted and start as an apprentice, go ahead and start the class, and you can always drop the class and just focus on your apprenticeship duties. If
Oh,
there's a
thank you.
class, if there's a class that's starting within like a couple of months of you starting the apprenticeship program, then you'll just need to get approval from your project manager before they say, yeah, you
Sure.
can go ahead and take a class, because you might be completely wiped out and exhausted from all of the
Yeah,
work that
sure.
they're doing on the
Sure. I'm
project.
just want to
Yeah.
have like a second way for myself.
Yeah.
Okay, if I will not get an apprentice, okay, I will continue my education.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Appreciate. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Question. Can I apply for like to be on a wait list? Like, let's suppose for the beginning of September, if there is a spot for apprenticeship and it opens and I'm back, can I like mention somewhere?
Yeah. So if you're if you're taking the break while you travel, Olga, and you wanted to like basically kind of apply for the apprenticeship after the end of your practicum, then there is a direct to apprenticeship link that I'll send you. So that way, when you're ready to apply for the apprenticeship after you've completed, a class and a practicum, which you will have done by that point, then you can just complete that and you'll put in your application notations that like, I already took a class with you, I already took practicum with you. I just left for a couple of months and now I'm back and I'm interested in the apprenticeship if there's a spot open for it. Yeah, so it's not like at the end of practicum, and this holds true for everybody. At the end of practicum, if it's not the right time for you to apply for the apprenticeship and you don't want to apply for the apprenticeship at the end of practicum, that's okay. It's not a this chance or no chance kind of a thing. You can always come back and say, I'd like to apply direct to the apprenticeship, weeks, months, years after you've completed the advanced class and practicum. That's totally fine to do. Other questions? We've wrapped up all of the basic information in the slides and everything that I like to go over with everybody. So we'll stick around, Frank and I, in case you have other questions that need answered. I'm going to go ahead and end recording unless anybody does have questions that would be helpful to have on the recording for others that might have had connection issues or missed the meeting tonight. Okay, stopping recording. Thank you all for attending tonight.